The hearing room was full, every chair taken, every eye fixed on the front. Cameras clicked, pens hovered above notepads, and the air itself felt heavy. At the witness table sat Judge Samuel Alito, calm and confident in his black robes. He leaned back slightly, lips curling into a smirk as he brushed off a question from Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. His voice dripped with condescension, as if he were scolding a child. He didn't just answer her. He dismissed her, making it clear he thought she wasn't worth his time. The room shifted immediately. Democratic lawmakers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while Republicans leaned back, satisfied, some even smiling. To them, it seemed Alito had scored a point, putting the young Congresswoman in her place. For a moment, the judge believed he had controlled the narrative. He thought the exchange was over. But what he didn't realize was that this single smirk, this single dismissive wave of the hand, would set the stage for a storm he could not control. Across from him sat Jasmine Crockett, not rattled, not flustered. Her burgundy blazer was sharp, her posture steady, her eyes locked onto his. Behind that calm stare was a fighter, one who had spent years in Dallas courtrooms defending people who had no one else to stand for them. She wasn't the type to back down, not in Texas and certainly not here, in the halls of Congress. And in this moment, she knew the stakes were far greater than one hearing. This wasn't about her reputation or his pride, it was about something larger, something the entire nation would soon witness. So the question is this: what happens when one of the most powerful judges in America tries to silence a congresswoman who refuses to be ignored? Stay with us, because what follows isn't just another political debate, it's a moment that will be remembered as history. The questioning began like so many hearings before it. Judge Samuel Alito leaned on decades of experience, answering with long polished responses that sounded official but revealed almost nothing. Each time a Democrat pressed him about ethics or accountability, he wrapped his words in legal terms that only experts could fully follow. It was the kind of language designed to run out the clock, safe, vague, and untouchable. When Republican members got their turn, the tone shifted completely. They asked easy, friendly questions that let him relax. "Judge, could you explain the difference between friendship and corruption?" one asked with a smile. Alito gladly explained, framing his trips and connections as harmless. To him, it was routine. But underneath the surface, the room's energy was shifting. Democrats grew sharper with their follow-ups. They weren't satisfied with half-answers. The judge's replies began to tighten, his jaw clenching when a question pressed too close. For the first time, irritation crept through his calm exterior. He wasn't losing control, but the cracks were starting to show. Then it was Jasmine Crockett's turn. She adjusted her microphone, flipped open a thick folder, and spoke with steady control. "Judge Alito," she began, "last year you took a luxury fishing trip to Alaska with a billionaire who had cases before this court. That trip was never disclosed. Can you explain how that fits with the standard of ethics expected from a Supreme Court justice?" Alito barely paused. His response came sharp and dismissive. "Congresswoman, I'm not sure you understand how judicial ethics actually work. These disclosure rules are complex." Before he could continue, Crockett leaned forward. Her tone was calm but firm. "Actually, Your Honor, I understand perfectly. I've been practicing law for 15 years. What I don't understand is how a Supreme Court justice believes he's above the same standards that apply to every other judge in this country." The room went quiet. Alito's eyes narrowed. The lecturing tone returned, heavier now. "Perhaps, Congresswoman, you should focus on making laws rather than telling judges how to interpret them. The separation of powers exists for a reason." But Crockett wasn't shaken. She pulled out a document from her folder, her voice steady as she read. "Judge, in your own words, written during your time on the Third Circuit, you said, and I quote, 'Even the appearance of impropriety can undermine public confidence in the judiciary. Judges must avoid any situation that might reasonably call their impartiality into question.' Do you remember writing that?" For the first time, Alito's composure slipped. He shifted in his seat, smirk tugging at his lips as if mocking the question. "Congresswoman, context matters," he replied, his voice dripping with condescension. "Maybe you should focus on issues you actually understand." The words hung in the air like a slap. The smirk was meant to end the exchange, to show everyone he was still in control. Republicans leaned back, satisfied once again. Some even smiled, as though their champion had delivered the knockout blow. But others in the room felt the opposite. Democratic members straightened in their chairs, their faces hardening. Young staffers in the gallery stopped typing on their phones and stared forward. Reporters exchanged quick glances. Civil rights activists who had come to watch tightened their jaws. Everyone felt it, the arrogance, the dismissal, the institutional superiority of a man who believed accountability didn't apply to him. And then there was Crockett.
She didn't flinch. She didn't speak right away.
She stayed completely still, her eyes locked on him, her silence louder than any words. She looked less like a shaken congresswoman and more like a seasoned lawyer who had just caught her witness in a lie. The camera zoomed in, capturing every detail, the smirk on Alito's face, the fire building in hers. That pause shifted everything. The audience could feel something was coming. A confrontation was building that would push past legal jargon, past party politics, and strike at the very heart of the question on millions of Americans' minds. Can the most powerful judge in the land really live by a different set of rules? Something was about to break wide open. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her voice steady but sharper now, carrying through the silent chamber. What I understand, she began, her tone deliberate, is that I've spent 15 years fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. I've stood in courtrooms across Texas, taking on police departments, schools and corporations that thought they were untouchable. And every time, I followed the rules. I played fair, even when it wasn't easy. She paused, letting her words cut through the air. What I understand is that when a client once tried to give me a $500 gift card, I turned it down.
Why?
Because it would have been a conflict. Because even the appearance of something improper mattered.
That's what ethics means.
And yet, here you sit, a Supreme Court justice, taking luxury trips on private jets, staying in lodges worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, never reporting them, and telling the American people it's no big deal. The murmur in the gallery grew louder. Alito's smirk faltered just slightly, but he pushed back, his voice rising. These are politically motivated attacks. Crockett didn't blink. Her reply was calm, almost quiet, but the steel in her tone was unmistakable. Accountability isn't political. Ethics isn't political. Following the same rules as every other judge in this country isn't political. The shift in the room was clear now. Reporters leaned forward, typing frantically. Staffers exchanged quick glances, some nodding along. Even seasoned lawmakers looked rattled by how direct she was being. Crockett continued, her eyes locked on him. What I understand is that you bought stock in a company, then ruled on their case just months later. What I understand is that you participated in cases where you owned financial interests. What I understand is that your wife flew flags tied to the January 6th attack on this very government while you were deciding related cases. And what I understand, Judge, is that if any other federal judge had done even half of this, they'd be removed from the bench.
But you?
You sit here smirking.
Alito's face flushed.
He tried to interject, his voice sharp now. You don't get to tell the Supreme Court how to operate. But Crockett was ready. Her voice rose, strong but never losing control.
No, Judge.
What you don't seem to understand is that the Supreme Court isn't above the law. In this country, no one is. Then came the blow that shook the room. She leaned in, her eyes burning into his. Power without accountability isn't justice. It's tyranny. The words landed like a strike. The smirk disappeared. For the first time all day, Samuel Alito looked shaken, caught in the spotlight with nowhere to run.
And then it happened.
From the back of the gallery, a young civil rights lawyer stood up and began to clap. At first, it was just one pair of hands echoing through the chamber.
Then another. And another.
Within seconds, the sound swelled, filling the room as more and more people rose to their feet. Staffers, activists, even some reporters couldn't help themselves. The applause rolled like thunder, breaking every rule of congressional decorum. Democratic members of the committee smiled wide, some even joining in the clapping. Republican members froze, their expressions a mix of anger and disbelief. Judge Alito looked stunned, his usual control gone. The room felt electric, alive with a force bigger than the hearing itself. Phones buzzed, cameras zoomed in, and in that moment everyone knew this exchange wasn't just another tense hearing, it was something larger. The narrator's voice cut through, steady and clear. This wasn't politics as usual. This was a cultural shift playing out live. A young congresswoman had stood her ground against one of the most powerful men in the nation and won. Not just the argument, but the hearts of everyone watching. Within minutes of the exchange, the impact could be felt far beyond the hearing room. Clips of Jasmine Crockett's words, especially her line, "Power without accountability isn't justice. It's tyranny," flooded social media. The hashtag Crockett vs. Alito shot to the top of trending lists. In just hours, the video had millions of views, spreading across Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Comment sections filled with messages like, "Finally, someone said it, and this is the kind of leadership we need." News anchors scrambled to cover the story. Legal experts broke down the moment frame by frame. Activists shared it as proof that powerful people could be challenged, and that courage still mattered in American politics. Politically, the fallout was immediate. Democrats praised Crockett's performance as both bold and necessary, while Republicans struggled to defend Alito without appearing elitist. Some chose silence. Others tried to dismiss it as grandstanding, but their words rang hollow against the viral power of the clip. Behind the scenes, pressure began building for new ethics laws targeting the Supreme Court. Reform groups seized the momentum, calling Crockett's stand a turning point. For her, this hearing was more than just a debate. Overnight, she was no longer seen as a first-term congresswoman. She was a rising figure on the national stage, someone whose preparation and conviction had shaken one of the most powerful judges in the country. The cultural effect was just as powerful as the political one. In classrooms, law students replayed the moment, analyzing how Crockett had stayed calm under fire and used Alito's own words against him. Activists printed her quote on t-shirts, posters and stickers, turning it into a rallying cry. Ordinary Americans, many of whom had long felt ignored by political elites, finally felt like someone was speaking directly for them. Crockett had voiced the frustration of millions, that the system seemed rigged, that powerful figures played by different rules, and that it was time someone called them out. But this was bigger than one clash. It became a lesson in what accountability really means. It showed that you don't need decades in Washington or a title like justice to stand up for what's right. You need preparation, courage, and the will to say what others are too afraid to say. Crockett reminded the country that even in the halls of power, the truth can still break through. And that's where the story circles back to you. Because this wasn't just about Jasmine Crockett versus Samuel Alito. It was about the idea that accountability belongs to all of us. In a democracy, no one is above the law, not even the highest judge in the land. That principle only survives if people demand it, watch for it, and refuse to stay silent when leaders abuse their power. So here's the truth. Moments like this matter because they show us what's possible. They remind us that the system can still be challenged, that voices can still cut through arrogance, and that real change begins with ordinary people paying attention. Crockett's stand wasn't just a victory in one hearing, it was proof that courage can ripple outward, inspire millions, and even push the most untouchable institutions to answer for their actions. The fight for accountability doesn't end in one room or with one person. It continues every day. And that's why it's important for you to stay engaged, stay informed, and share stories like this. Because democracy only works when we, the people, hold power to its highest standard. So remember this moment.
Share it. Talk about it.
Carry it forward. Because when leaders forget they serve the people, it's up to the people to remind them. And the next time someone stands up to power, it might just be you.